Alright, for this video, we're going to go over some of the terms I use for exercises for bench press, mostly being competition bench, close grip bench, wide grip bench, max grip bench, those kind of terms. So the first thing you want to do is figure out what kind of bar you have, because bars have these rings on them called power ring. So any kind of powerlifting specific bar, like this is a Texas power bar, or if you use a Roga power bar, any kind of competition bar, Alico, Ivanco, are going to have these rings at a set distance, which is 81 centimeters, which is about 32 inches. But if you use a generic commercial bar or a weightlifting bar or just some kind of crappy bar, these rings might be in a different spot. I've seen some of them, like at LA Fitness, that are actually closer in. So what your grip you're using maybe on a bar in the gym is going to be different, or when you go to competition, it brings in a different spot. So the first thing you want to do is, if you don't have a powerlifting bar, is measure this distance from the inside of the mark of the ring to the inside of the other mark of the ring. And this one is just inside 32 inches, which is what we want. Alright, so then you can use these rings as a guideline for where you're gripping. So that's why I'm going to ask you guys, how do you grip the bar? Most of you will say, well, pinky covering the ring, middle finger covering the ring, index finger on the ring. Now you be a good guideline. But if your rings are in a different spot, then you need to figure that out first. So competition grip is obviously wherever you use your grip in a competition. So most of us will be somewhere between ring finger on the ring and index finger on the ring. Alright, we don't want to be going too close, since that's not as efficient. Okay? So now for a close grip, really the way you should be thinking about it is a closer grip. So it's going to be dependent on what your competition grip is. So if your competition grip is all the way out on index finger on the ring, then close grip is going to be anything inside of that. Versus if someone's pinky on the ring, then their close grip may be, it's going to be inside that, which may be closer in comparison to someone else. So you shouldn't be necessarily comparing your close grip to someone else, because their competition grip might be a different distance than you. So, same thing for a wide grip. Your wide grip is going to be wider than your competition grip, okay? So it's going to be, again, relative to where your competition grip is. If your competition grip is already at index finger on the ring, then your wide grip will be a little bit outside of that, so obviously you can't go too far out before your hands get in the way of your rack. Depending on how your rack goes, you might only have so much space to go out. So you might only go out a little bit. So maybe your wide grip will only be an inch wider on each side than your competition grip. So here's the ring, so it might only be that much wider. Versus if you're going to close grip, you have much more space, so you might actually make a big difference where here's the ring, and you might be much closer. For most people, you probably don't want to go closer than where the smooth part of the bar touches the sharp part of the bar. The reason being is, if you go too narrow, first of all, your hands are going to hit your chest or your torso before the bar even reaches. Okay? So that's going to mess you up. Second is, whatever grip we're using for our close grip, we want to try and keep our forearms vertical in the bottom position. So if you go too narrow, you're not going to be able to get all the way down with your forearm being vertical. So what's going to happen is, you're going to have it like this, where your elbows are shooting out to the sides. Okay, so that's not what we want to do. So for most of you, closest you're going to be is right where the smooth part is. So you can see, I can still get my forearms pretty vertical. Alright, but like I said, as long as it's closer than your competition grip, that's fine. So you can even do your close grip maybe an inch out, just like that, so that I can get my forearm vertical, and it's still pretty far. So here's the ring. So if I had my index finger here, you're still going more than a hand's distance in, and it'll still be fine. You can even do a thumb's length away if you want. So here, even with a thumb's length away, my pinkies are still inside the ring. So if I was at index finger on the ring for my competition grip, and I brought it all the way into pinky inside that ring, still a big difference. And and that'll still be fine for a close grip. And you'll still be able to keep that forearm vertical, elbows close to your side, and be able to use a little bit more triceps and a little bit more range of motion for the movement. Okay? Even if you have a somewhat narrow grip for your competition, say peak on the ring, and you have space to go wide, you don't want to go too big of a difference when you go for the wider grip, because typically that's where people will get more issues as far as like their pecs hurting, shoulders hurting, any kind of like impingement in the shoulder. So when we go wide, we want to do a smaller change, and when you go narrow, you can obviously do a bigger change. So for wide, even if you just went like one finger width wider on each hand or spine, or if you want to bump it up and go like 1 full inch, maybe 1.5 inches wider on each side, that's going to be fine. That small bit of difference of going wider is still going to hit your pecs more. It's going to make it harder off the chest, and it's going to decrease that range of motion a little bit, while kind of keeping us still safe. You don't want to go from maybe pinky inside the rings to going index finger outside the rings. And it's going to be a huge change that your body's not used to, your shoulders are not going to be used to. You're going to get really tight in the pecs, since it's going to be a big difference for that muscle and how much it's getting stretched. And then it might cause some issues. If I write something like max grip bench, the maximum grip allowable in competition is that index finger on the ring. You have to be covering that ring in competition. If they can see the ring, so here's the ring, if the judge can see the ring inside of my hand, that's going to be an illegal grip. They're going to tell me to rack the bar and bring my hand in where you're covering the ring, it's not covering the ring. So if I give you a max grip as the adjective for your bench press, then that's going to be that grip. Regardless of what your competition grip is or your close grip is, then that is going to be separate, and that'll just be using the maximum allowable grip. But if I'm using the terms close grip or wide grip, then it's relative to what your competition grip is. So it's really closer than your competition grip and wider than your competition grip. And again, for the wider, small change. For the closer, you can do a bigger change. But even then, you don't have to do a huge change where it's going to drop your numbers drastically. If you just change your grip a little bit closer, it's going to make a difference. You'll probably do maybe 10 to 20% less weight, but we're also trying to do a bigger range of motion, hit different muscles. But you don't want to bring it in so close and make it so much difference where you can only hit like 50% of your bench, because then we're not working with the kind of load we want to. It kind of makes it less effective. All right, let me know if you guys still have any questions.